Hello, how are you today? Are you fine? I'm also very well here today again to talk about sports. Today we're going to talk about physical training. It's going to be the topic of our lesson today, and I want to show you now, the topic of the topics we're going to be dealing with in our lesson today. Today's contents are, as you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about how to describe physical training, and we're going to talk about how to describe an athlete's training routine. You know the word athlete already, and we know what training means, so I think it's very easy for you, to be able to understand what we're going to be talking about today. Before we go into the topic of today's lesson, I want to talk about the tabloid. O sea, ustedes han estado preguntando acerca del tabloide de este curso, y nosotros queremos la información de dónde se puede obtener vía electrónica este material que les puede servir a ustedes para estudiar para las clases. Muchos de los diálogos, de los textos que nosotros hemos estado utilizando en las clases recientes, e incluso los que vamos a utilizar en las clases que se avecinan, aparecen ya en el segundo tabloide de este curso, de este cuarto curso de inglés. Y ustedes pueden, si tienen la posibilidad de acceder a esta página de información, la que aparece en pantalla en estos momentos, usted entra a esta página. Cuando esté en la página, en el buscador de la página, o sea, cuando usted le dice buscar, usted va a escribir tabloide y le va a aparecer ahí los dos tabloides del curso de inglés de Universidad para Todos, este cuarto curso de inglés. O sea, nuevamente usted entra a la página www.cubaeduca.cu. Una vez que esté ya en esta página, pues entonces pone en el buscador tabloide y le va a aparecer entonces los dos tabloides de nuestro cuarto curso de Universidad para Todos de inglés. Bueno, ya con esta información quizás puedan estudiar los contenidos de esta propia clase, porque algunos de los materiales que nosotros vamos a utilizar hoy están también ya en este segundo tabloide del cuarto curso de inglés. All right. When you are going to talk about physical training, sometimes people have questions, all right? And then if you talk to an athlete, maybe you wonder, about things that they do and how often they do these things. So what I have now on the screen is just, some questions that maybe you would like to ask of an athlete if you want to know about his or her physical preparation. Let's come to the screen now, and I'll be reading the questions for you, right? The first question is, what do you do to warm up? You know that when an athlete, is going to take part in a competition or just when he or she is going to start training, then he has to warm up. It's part of the physical preparation so that he does not get an injury, all right? So going back to the screen now, we have 5 questions. Number 1 is, what do you do to warm up? Warm up, calentamiento, all right? Para hacer el calentamiento, para calentarse. So what do you do to warm up? It's number 1. Number 2 has to do with frequency. How often do you do physical training? That is the question. How often do you do physical training? And the word physical, look at the spelling, with a Y there, P-H-Y-S-I-C-A-L. Physical. And it is pronounced with a Z sound, physical, all right? So how often do you do physical training? So that has to do with whether this athlete, does physical training 2 or 3 times a week or every day. So that would be the answer to this second question here. Number 3, do you ever get relaxation exercises? Relaxation, is probably at the end of your physical session, of your physical training session. You will need to relax maybe. So then you will get some special relaxation exercises, to relax your body after having been involved in a hard training session. Number 4 is, how do you work on your flexibility, all right? So some sports require that the athletes should be very flexible. And then you need to work on your flexibility. And we're going to talk today about some things you can do in order to be more flexible. Not only, in sports, but in general in your daily life. And number 5, how do you manage to keep fit? Fit means physically okay, in good shape. En buena forma, o sea, ¿cómo se la arregla? How do you manage to keep fit? And here we have a combination of the E and I sounds we've been talking about in our last few lessons. Maybe remember that we said that The E sound, like in the word keep, is a very tense sound, usually long, and the sound in fit is a very lax sound, usually short. So then, how do you manage to keep fit? So these are some questions that maybe you want to ask of an athlete, when you see him or her, and you want to know about, how he or she trains for competitions. All right? Now we're going to show you a dialogue. And this dialogue is going to be between two people who are going to talk about, the training routine of athletes in a certain training center. So there are going to be two people today in this conversation, and these are Clive and Thomas. These are their names. So you're going to have here on the screen now the names of these two people and what they say in the first, let's say, part of this conversation. Let's see now, and please copy, okay, while I talk. So do not, refrain from copying. Start copying now. Clive says, I know you have the best basketball team in the whole country. Basketball is a sport which is in the Olympic program. We've talked about it already. And then, I'm going to say it again, I know you have the best basketball team in the whole country. They must train very hard to keep such a high level. All right? Look at the use of must here. They must train very hard to keep such a high level. Must with the meaning of a logical deduction. Ellos deben entrenar muy fuerte, ¿verdad? Para poder mantenerse a ese nivel tan alto. That will be the translation here. So they must train. And must here does not mean obligation. It means logical deduction. Es una deducción lógica porque si tiene un equipo tan bueno, evidentemente este equipo debe prepararse muy bien, debe entrenar muy fuerte para poder tener ese nivel. Nadie en el deporte, y mucho menos en la actualidad, con el desarrollo que tiene el deporte a nivel internacional, puede llegar a mantener un nivel de competitivo tan alto si no realiza sesiones de entrenamiento serias, planificadas, organizadas. All right? So then, and Thomas says, yes, all of our sportsmen must work very hard to remain in our training center. Here we have another meaning of must. The meaning of must here is that of obligation. If they want to be here, they have to work hard. So must here is a synonym of what? Of have to. Fíjense, tienen que. Aquí sí must significa obligación. So we're talking about the verb must, which is a modal verb that has two main meanings, and both of them come into play here in this conversation. Number one is they must train very hard, said by Clive, and that is with the meaning of a logical deduction. And in the second case is the meaning of obligation when Thomas says, yes, all of our sportsmen must work very hard to remain in our training center. But we're actually more demanding exigente. We're more demanding with our basketball team. That's probably why they have reached such a high standard of performance. That's probably why they have reached such a high standard of performance. That's why. Es por eso, okay? They have reached such a high standard of performance. So this is some language we have here. Using must with the meaning of logical deduction in the first case, and then using must with the meaning of obligation in the second case. Maybe you need a couple of seconds to finish copying before we go into the next activity. Come on, let's copy what you have on the screen now. Come on. Okay, that was the first part of the conversation, and this conversation goes on. We're going to see now the second part of it, right? So what I'm going to show now is the continuation, of this conversation between Clive and Thomas. Clive is a visitor who has come to this training center, and Thomas is showing the center around. I mean, he is just showing this place where he works to his visitor, Clive. So let's see here on the screen. Clive says, do they have to meet certain requirements to be accepted here? To meet requirements, cumplir con requisitos. Aquí la palabra meet no significa conocer, sino que implica cumplir. Cuando usted combina meet and requirements, you put them together, then meet has a different meaning. It's the meaning of cumplir. You meet requirements. También significa, como usted empata meet con needs, es satisfacer necesidades. To meet the needs, then meet does not mean as it means here. It means satisfacer necesidades, pero no está en este contexto. En este contexto aparece meet requirements, which means cumplir ciertos requisitos, como aparece en el contexto. All right? So then, do they have to meet certain requirements to be accepted here? That's a question. All right? And Thomas answers, certainly. All right? Basketball players have to take physical tests that measure their strength. Okay? We're talking about the tests. So unas pruebas que se le hacen. So basketball players have to have to take physical tests that measure their strength, speed, endurance, and other parameters. Fíjense aquí hay palabras que nos expresan qué se mide en estas pruebas. We're talking about strength, fuerza, fortaleza, strength. We're talking about speed, velocidad, and also endurance, which means resistencia. So these are certain, let's say, aspects, certain parameters that they take into account when they choose the basketball players that they want to have in their team. So, they're given tests, they go through tests, and these tests measure three main matters, three main, let's say, things. Number one is strength, number two is speed, and number three is endurance, all right? So let's see now, let's go on copying. Certainly, basketball players have to take physical tests that measure their strength, speed, endurance, and other parameters. Basketball players, that basketball is a tough sport. Tough, un deporte muy duro. Basketball is a tough sport. Besides that, they must be taller than 6 feet. We're talking about height. Estamos hablando de estatura. Of course, that basketball, as well as some other sports, is a sport that requires, that the athletes, be very tall. Because, what they do in the game, is facilitated, by the fact that, the player is taller than others. So in this case, we're talking about height. So Thomas is saying that basketball players must be taller than 6 feet to begin with. 6 feet is almost nothing when it comes to basketball. But just to begin with, if you're a very young athlete, maybe you're going to grow later, this is the minimum height that you have to, have in order to be accepted in a basketball team. And then Clive would say, I understand. Basketball players must be very tall. And then this must here at the end, do you think this must here is logical deduction or obligation? Vamos a analizar el uso de must en los dos últimos ejemplos. Que sigan ustedes copiando mientras yo hablo, cuando ustedes copian. Y aquí must significa obligación. O sea, es necesario, es importante, es imprescindible que estos jugadores de baloncesto sean personas altas, que tengan determinada estatura. Same as in volleyball, right? We talked about track and field in one of our lessons before. We've talked about volleyball when we talked about Mireya Lewis a few days ago. We also talked about chess a few days ago, and now we're talking about basketball, another sport. So then, besides that, they must be taller than 6 feet. And then Clive would say, I understand. Basketball players must be very tall. I'm going to give you now a few more seconds to finish copying, right? So come on, copy. I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds, right? Go ahead. Okay, so we have talked about must, which is a modal verb with the meaning of obligation, but we also have here, in the same slide, we have the verb have. To have to has the same meaning. Tener que is also obligation. Fíjense en la primera pregunta, do they have to meet certain requirements? También se habla de obligación. Tienen que. Usted podría haber usado aquí en lugar de have to, también must. Y hubiera sido la pregunta, must they meet certain requirements to be accepted here? It would be the same meaning. All right? Good. But normally when you're asking questions, you prefer to use have to instead of must. But that's only a preference. There's no difference in meaning between must and have to here. So now that we're talking about height, maybe you would be interested in knowing about tall players. You know that in basketball, we're sometimes shocked when we see, very tall players participating in a basketball game. And I want to show you now a picture, and also I'm going to give you information about one of the tallest players ever in basketball. All right? So, we're talking about height. Vamos a hablar acerca de estatura. Fíjense la palabra height, cómo se escribe. H-E-I-G-H-T. The spelling of the word, and you pronounce it height. Height is the pronunciation of that word. So, we're talking about height. And then I have here two questions. The first question is, who is the tallest basketball player today? And there you have a picture. Yeah, it's real. It's a human being, what you see there, right? So then, the answer is Mr. Sun Mingming. He's a Chinese player. All right? Sun Mingming is the tallest player in basketball today. So that is the answer to the first question. Now, the second question is very important because then we'll learn how to ask about height. ¿Cómo se pregunta la estatura de una persona? Usted le pregunta a una persona, ¿qué estatura usted tiene? Le pregunta, how tall are you? ¿Ok? How tall are you? Como sería una equivalencia si fuéramos a traducir palabra por palabra, ¿cuán alto es usted? Pero por supuesto en español no hablamos así. Sería solamente para ustedes se den cuenta el ordenamiento, o sea, la sintaxis de la pregunta en inglés. So then, how tall are you? And then, how tall is Mr. Ming Ming? Let's now look at the screen. How tall is he? He is 2 meters and 36 centimeters tall, or 2.36 meters tall. Aquí estamos usando la primera respuesta del sistema métrico, and then in the second one, 7 feet 9 inches tall. And that is information in the system they use, for example, in the United States. So, en los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, no utilizan no miden la estatura de las personas en metros, sino que se hace en pies y en pulgadas. Como también a veces decimos en Cuba, yo mido 6 pies 2 pulgadas. Eso se sigue utilizando, aunque hay una tendencia más a utilizar el sistema métrico en nuestro país, cuando se habla, por ejemplo, de kilómetros. En los Estados Unidos se habla de millas. Cuando se habla en Cuba, por ejemplo, no solamente en Cuba, en muchos países se utiliza el kilogramo en lugar de la libra. O sea, esas son las equivalencias que existen. Cuando se habla de sistema métrico, se habla de kilogramo, se habla de metros, como en el caso que tenemos aquí en la pantalla. Okay, so 2.36 meters tall, that is how tall Mr. Ming Ming is. That's fascinating, to see this man playing. All right, so now I'm going to show you examples of how we can use must in communication when we're talking about sports. So then, using must to talk about sports. And you may have noticed that I have used must here in capital letters. And the intention is for you not to make a mistake, not to understand the incorrect thing. Must is never followed by to in a sentence. But here you say, using must to talk about sports. Ese to que está después de must, usted no lo va a ver nunca en una oración en que must está usando como verbo. Aquí estamos hablando acerca de must, pero no está conjugado, o sea, ese verbo no se conjuga nunca, pero no aparece en la oración integrado como el verbo que estamos utilizando para comunicarnos. So then, I said before that must may have two different meanings. One is obligation and number two is logical deduction. In the case of obligation, I have brought here and I have written here 3 examples for you to copy. Number 1 is you must train very hard before the competition. Everyone has to do so. So you must train very hard before the competition. You must train very hard before the competition. Must, fíjense que no se acentúa. Cuando uno utiliza must, como pasa con la mayor parte de los verbos modales, cuando lo utilizan oraciones afirmativas, no hay una tendencia a acentuar esa palabra dentro de la oración. O sea, las palabras tienen dentro de sí mismas acentos de la palabra. Cuando tiene más de una sílaba, uno sabe cuál de las sílabas tiene que acentuar, pero en el caso del acento oracional, se trata de aquellas palabras que uno acentúa dentro de la oración, y en este caso, you must train very hard. Normalmente, a menos que se quiera hacer un énfasis muy específico, se acentúa el train, o sea, el verbo que viene después, y no el verbo modal. So then you would say, you must train very hard before the competition. Number 2, you must follow your coach's instructions during the game. Some athletes don't do that, and they get into trouble. So then, number 2 is you must follow your coach's instructions during the game. I think you understand this. Follow, seguir, and the other words are very similar to Spanish in coaches and instructions, you know. And then number 3 is you must keep yourself focused. And that has to do with the psychological preparation for the competition, all right? When you're focused, it means you're concentrated, all right? You're not thinking about anything else but the actual competition. You know, you have to be thinking about what you're doing in the event, in the competition, in the tournament, and then there is no room for anything else, all right? So that is what we mean when we say you must keep yourself focused. And listen to the pronunciation of this word, focused. We have a diphthong here, focused, okay? Focused. All right. So once again, I'm going to read them all for you to, let's say for you to, you know, to practice this. So pronunciation is like this: focused, fo. Hay un dictongo o, focused. Now listen to the ending, focused. All right. So then you must keep yourself focused. Even here, when you're learning English, not only when you're playing sports, all right? So then, let's come here to the screen again. Number 1 is, you must train very hard before the competition. Number 2, you must follow your coach's instructions during the game. You must keep yourself focused. Ahora, cuando se trata de una persona que no cumple con estas cosas y el entrenador se lo va a exigir, entonces sí acentúa el must. You must do it, all right? Pero aquí tenemos una intención diferente. No estamos hablando en un sentido neutral, sino que estamos haciéndolo de manera, vamos a decir, enfática, y por eso así acentuamos el verbo modal must, que implica la obligación. Okay? So that's about obligation. Now we're going to learn how to use must to indicate a logical deduction. Let's see here. We have 4 examples here on the screen. Fíjense que es la misma palabra, el mismo verbo modal con significados diferentes. Tal y como sucede en el español y seguramente en otras lenguas, hay palabras que tienen más de un significado, son palabras que son polisemánticas, y este caso es la palabra must, que aunque usted la ve escrita igual, tiene un significado distinto. And let's see now on the screen. Number 1 is, it must be very difficult to stop Sun Ming from dunking. What is dunking? You see very tall players, you know, they come with the ball and they slam the ball in the basket, all right? Es como que llegan, saltan y clavan la pelota en el cesto, en el baloncesto, ¿verdad? So then, it must be very difficult to stop Sun Ming from dunking. Dunking, clavar, en ese caso la pelota. Y fíjense el verbo stop aquí, combinado con la preposición from. To stop someone from. Evitar que alguien haga algo. Y el verbo se utiliza en forma de ing, o sea, el que viene después del from. Por supuesto, porque es una preposición. Then, once again, it must be very difficult to stop Sun Ming from dunking. It's a logical deduction. Fíjese que no es una obligación. Uno deduce, lógicamente, si es una persona tan alto, un jugador que mide 2.36, debe ser bien difícil entonces poder evitar que él clave la bola, porque no hay otros jugadores tan altos como él que se lo puedan evitar. That's why we say that we have here a logical deduction. Okay, you have to use your brain. All right, good. So it must be very difficult to stop Sun Ming from dunking. Number 1. Number 2 is, she must have trained very hard to achieve such a high level of performance. must have trained, debe haber entrenado. Hay una combinación aquí del uso del must con la estructura del present perfect, all right? So once again, she must have trained very hard to achieve such a high level of performance. We know the word performance, which means rendimiento, all right? In sports, performance no es actuación tanto, sino rendimiento. So then, once again, she must have trained very hard to achieve such a high level of performance. Number 3, the judges gave her the maximum score. She must have done a perfect job. We're talking about gymnastics, for example. Sabemos que hay deportes que son los jueces los que evalúan. Maybe gymnastics here. So the judges gave her the maximum score. She must have done a perfect job. Debe haber hecho un trabajo perfecto. Fíjense, debe haberlo. Estamos deduciendo. Si le dieron una máxima puntuación, como en la época, por ejemplo, de los años 70, cuando la gimnástica daba puntuación máxima de 10 puntos, ahora el sistema ha cambiado. Muchos que ya estaban viendo televisión y les gustaba el deporte en el año 76 recordarán, por ejemplo, los 10 puntos de Nadia Comaneci, la rumana de 14 años en la Olimpiada de Montreal. Fue la primera vez que se daba 10 puntos. That was the maximum score given by the judges at that time. So then, the judges gave her the maximum score. She must have done a perfect job. And number 4, you must be proud of your team. They have won 3 championships in a row. Of course, they've been so good that you need to be. I mean, you have to be proud of them. That's a logical deduction. I mean, that's what what I think. Because your team is so good, I think you must be very proud of them. All right. So these are examples of the use of, let's say, of logical deduction and obligation using the verb must in English. Okay, this modal verb must in English. Let's see now how this conversation goes on, because we began with a conversation, we stopped for a minute, and now we're going to see what comes next. I mean, the continuation of this conversation. All right? So, Thomas is here again. Thomas and Clive, they continue talking. All right? And here we have also lots of text. I mean, acá hay muchas palabras, pero es importante que usted tenga la información porque le permite incorporar nuevo vocabulario. That's the reason why we've given you here these dialogues in which you can see lots of new words. So Thomas says, they have to go through very long training sessions every day. To go through, pasar, atravesar, pasar por, okay? They have to go through very long sessions, training sessions every day. They must get up early and follow their training programs to the letter. So once again, have to in the first sentence and must in the second sentence with the same meaning. The meaning here is obligation. All right? They have to go through very long training sessions every day. They must get up early and follow their training programs to the letter. ¿Qué querrá decir eso? To the letter. Es una frase que quiere decir al pie de la letra. To the letter. All right? So they have to follow their training programs to the letter. That's what it says here. This is the only way they can perform at their best, both physically and technically. So this is information given by Thomas, who is the director of this training center, and he's talking about, what his athletes do on a daily basis, right? So then they have to follow the program, they have to train very hard, and so on. So then Clive asks another question. Are there any other requirements? Are there any other requirements? Look at the use of are there, hay, y eso lo hemos hablado en muchas clases, pero eso no lo voy a profundizar aquí. And Thomas answers, yes. If they are students, they must pass all of their exams at school. Must, again, is an obligation here. You can't be a member of any of our teams if you don't get good results at school. Very important. ¿Ok? Y fíjense que aquí you can't es como una prohibición. Si usted no sale bien en las pruebas, no puede estar aquí con nosotros. ¿Ok? So you can't be a member of any of our national teams, if you don't get good results at school. So once again, here we have some modal verbs like must and can't with different meanings. All right? But at the end we have here a conditional. Fíjense que al final la última oración que ustedes tienen ahí se hace referencia, se utiliza una condicional. Ya hemos hablado en clases anteriores de cómo es que se forman las condicionales en inglés. Y hemos hablado que hay 3 tipos, o sea, eso no es el contenido de nuestra clase hoy, pero sí vamos a hablar un poquito acerca de lo que hemos nombrado, lo que en la lingüística, fundamentalmente en la sintaxis, en la gramática en sí, se explica como la condicional del primer tipo, es decir, lo que es posible. Cuando yo digo, si me levanto temprano, seguramente puedo coger la guagua, porque me levanté temprano, o sea, es algo que es posible realizar. So then here we have an example. I mean, if you don't get good results at school, you can't be a member of any of our teams. So the condition is to study to get good results. And if you fulfill the condition, then you're going to have the result. You're going to be here with us, all right? Vamos a ver ahora cómo se forman estas condicionales. So, using conditionals to talk about sports. How do we form a conditional here? How do we express a condition and the results of its fulfillment, all right? Fíjense aquí, cómo se expresa una condición y el resultado del cumplimiento de esta condición. So I have given you here 2 structures, like mathematics. If plus condition with a comma plus result. That's one way. Or results plus if plus condition. Y usted dirá, ¿y esto qué cosa es? Matemática. No, realmente no es, pero estamos dándole a usted un modelo para que usted pueda elaborar después sus ejercicios que van a entrar un poco más adelante utilizando esta estructura de las condicionales. Se puede ordenar de 2 maneras diferentes. Una, comenzando con if, como aparece aquí, if plus the condition and a comma, and then the result of fulfilling the condition, and then number 2 is the result plus if plus the condition. Y vamos a ver esto ahora un poco más concreto con un ejemplo. All right? Let's see here. If plus condition, comma plus result, we have one here. If you train very hard, comma, you'll be able to beat all your opponents. Beat, ganarle, derrotar. Derrotar. So if you train very hard, you'll be able to beat all your opponents. Fíjense que es if, la condición es entrenar fuerte, viene la coma, y después el resultado de si se cumple la condición. Si entrena bien, entonces podrá ganarle a todos los competidores. That's this, the order, the structure. And then we have then another way to say the same thing. We have the result plus if plus the condition. You'll be able to beat all your opponents if you train very hard. And there's no comma here. So it's the same structure, it's the same meaning, but using 2 different orders. The syntax changes, but the meaning is the same, all right? And we're stating conditions, and we are, referring to the result of their achievement, of their fulfillment, all right? So this is one of the most important, topics about grammar we're going to be dealing with today. So once again, we have talked about using must with the meaning of logical deduction and obligation, and now we're using here conditional sentences or conditional clauses, whatever you want to say, of the first type. Okay? Let's see now some more examples, all right? So, I want you to copy now. Vamos a copiar estos ejemplos. These are more examples of the use of conditionals when we talk about sports, all right? Let's see now. Copy, please. Number 1. If your team has good pictures, you'll probably be able to win the tournament. We know that. In baseball, if we have good pitchers, then the team will do well, for sure. In present day baseball, good hitters are important, but I think it's much more important to have good pitchers, So then, if your team has good pitchers, look at the use of if plus the condition plus a comma, you will probably be able to win the tournament. This is about baseball. Number 2, if the Ethiopian manages to keep close behind the Kenyans in the first 7 laps around the track, he may be able to overtake them in the final sprint. This is about athletics. Y si son 7 vueltas, fíjense, la palabra lap significa vueltas a la pista. So, the first 7 laps around the track, quizás estemos hablando del evento de los 3,000 metros, un evento que steeplechase, ese que se corre, ustedes saben que van y saltan y hay agua y tienen vallas, es un evento que los, si son 7 vueltas por 400 metros, quiere decir que son 2.800 metros. Si está detrás de los kenianos, que ustedes saben que en ese tipo de eventos son bastante fuertes, en los primeros 200, las primeras 7 vueltas, pues es posible, si se mantiene cerca, que los pueda superar. Y eso es lo que quiere decir overtake in the final sprint. You know the meaning of sprint? We talked about this before in one of our previous lessons when we devoted some time to talking about athletics. We used the word sprint, sprinter, and the like. All right? So then once again, if the Ethiopian manages to keep close behind the Kenyans in the first 7 laps around the track, he may be able to overtake them in the final sprint. Eso tiene que ver con el atletismo. Now we have more examples here. And these other examples here have to do with other sports. I mean, I wanted to cover a number of sports, not only 1 or 2 sports, but, you know, we started talking about basketball, then we talked about, like, say, baseball, then about athletics, and now we're going to talk about shooting, all right? Shooting, if the wind is not too strong this afternoon, the shotgun shooters will be able to hit most of the clay targets. Shotgun shooters, los escopeteros. Shotgun es la escopeta, and shooters, of course, are the competitors, the athletes who shoot the shotguns. All right. So then, if the wind is not too strong this afternoon, the shotgun shooters will be able to hit most of the clay targets. Clay targets son los platos. Han visto las competencias de esquí, de fosa en varios torneos. Los platos son hechos de barro. And clay can be spelled with C-L-A-Y, but also C-L-E-Y. They're both correct. So the spelling may be in 2 different ways. Clay, same word, same pronunciation, but 2 different spellings. So then, if the wind is not too strong this afternoon, the shotgun shooters will be able to hit most of the clay targets. We have a condition here and then a result. It is important that it is not too windy. Okay? Good. Number 2. If the Cuban blockers perform at their best, they will be able to stop the Brazilian powerful spikers. What are we talking about here? Blockers, spikers? Are we talking about baseball? Basketball? No, we're talking about volleyball. Blockers, los bloqueadores, and the spikers, los rematadores. All right? So once again, if the Cuban blockers perform at their best, o sea, compiten, actúan, tienen un rendimiento, su mejor rendimiento, they will be able to stop the Brazilian powerful spikers. We know that Brazil has a very strong team in volleyball. Actually, they won the gold medal in the recent World Championships where Cuba ranked 2nd. And number 5, if the judges are fair, what is the meaning of fair? Justos. Si los jueces son justos, they will give the Chinese divers a very high score for this dive. What is divers? Los clavadistas. We're talking about a sport in which the judges play an important role, like in gymnastics, all right? Or in boxing sometimes. So then, going back to the screen now, if the judges are fair, they will give the Chinese divers a very high score for this dive, okay? So I want to give you now 1 minute to finish copying these. These are examples you can, make use of here when we're talking about when we're using conditionals when we talk about sports. Come on, 30 seconds to finish copy. Go ahead. Okay, so I believe you had time to copy at least 2 of the 3 examples we had on the screen. And now I want to show you an example of how we can use a conditional when we ask a question. Let's come to the screen now and look at this. What may happen if you don't warm up enough? All right? What may happen if you don't warm up enough. All right? ¿Qué puede pasar? ¿Verdad? What may happen if you don't warm up enough? That's important to know. You know, some athletes, sometimes they overlook this. I mean, they do not really care about warming up. And then when they come to the competition, you know, they may get an injury. And here we have some examples of what may happen on the screen. So you may get an injury. I mean, if you do not warm up enough, you may get an injury. So this is a question with a conditional. And then what you have here in the 4 items is the possible results of not warming up enough, right? Number 1 is you may get an injury. Now look at the way we express this may. Another modal verb, in this case with the meaning of possibility. Es probable, es posible que se pueda lesionar. You may get an injury if you don't warm up enough. All right? Number 2 is you would probably pull a muscle. What is the meaning of that? Pulling a muscle. Alar un músculo no es contraer. Tener una contracción de un músculo. If you do not warm up enough, you may pull a muscle. All right? Good. That's number 2. You will probably, you know the meaning of probably, like in Spanish, pull a muscle. Number 4, your muscles will probably hurt. Muscles. Fíjense que la C esa que usted pudiera pronunciar como un K no se pronuncia aquí, sino que va directamente de como si fuera de la S a la L. Muscles, all right? So then, number 3 is your muscles will probably hurt. Number 4, your body will not be ready to perform at its best. Okay? If you do not warm up enough, your body will not be ready to perform at its best. And we use expression at its best, we mean a su mayor nivel, con mayor eficiencia, la mayor eficiencia, o sea, sería un poco lo mejor que puede hacer el cuerpo. No está preparado porque no ha tenido el suficiente calentamiento. All right? So once again, you may get an injury, you will probably pull a muscle, your muscles will probably hurt, your body will not be ready to perform at its best. And I want to show you now some things you can do to warm up. All right? Number 1 is this. These are some typical warm-up exercises. All right? Let's look at the screen now. Number 1 is rope jumping. Okay? And there you have a picture. I don't think I need to explain what it is because it's very clear there. You know, you have a picture. I'm not going to say what it is. But then you have an example down here in the sentence. She jumps the rope to get warmed up. A lot of people do that. She jumps the rope. Rope. Jumps. Rope significa soga, pero aquí no es una soga. Es como diríamos en español, la famosa suiza. So she jumps the rope to get warmed up. That's one example. All right? Number 2 here, we have another example of a typical exercise that people do in order to get warmed up. And it is sit-ups. I don't think I need to explain what they are. All right? Sit-ups. A lot of people, you know, do sit-ups when they want to lose weight. You know, they put on some weight around their waist and then they want to get rid of it, and what they do is that they do sit-ups. So she does 4 series of sit-ups at the start of her training sessions every morning to tune up her abdomen. Tune up, poner a tono, entonar. Eso también se utiliza para la música, cuando se habla de afinar los instrumentos musicales, también se utiliza ese verbo, tune up. So then she does 4 series of sit-ups at the start of her training sessions every morning to tune up her abdomen. All right? That's number 2. Let's see now the third one. Here we have the push-ups. Some people don't like to do push-ups. All right? And push-ups and sit-ups are probably they complement each other. I mean, because they get your body to work in different areas. So I'm going to show you now a picture of what a push-up is. This lady here is doing push-ups. All right? So doing push-ups helps her build her arm muscles. Arm muscles. I think you know what it means. Arm, los músculos de dónde serían? Fundamentalmente de los brazos. Es lo que se está diciendo aquí. So doing push-ups helps her build her arm muscles. This is American English. If you were saying this using British English, you would say, doing push-ups helps her to build her arm muscles. So there's here a difference between American and British English. O sea, el inglés británico incorporaría un to después de helps her to build her arm muscles. All right? That's number 3. Number 4, bending down. That's another exercise that people do in order to, let's say, to get warmed up. Like here, bending down helps your body keep flexible and fit. Of course, if you bend down, you're going to gain flexibility and you're going to be fit. You're going to be, in good shape. A lot of people also prefer this one. Okay? So bending down, doing push-ups, jumping the rope, and doing sit-ups are 4 of the exercises that we have shown so far. This is new language for you. Maybe for you, maybe for some of you it is not. But I'm sure that a lot of of our students will profit from this, and you're going to write down, these the names of these exercises. All right. So that's number 4. Bending down helps your body keep flexible and fit. Look how flexible this lady is. All right. So then number 5, chin-ups. Chin-ups. Lo que sería la barra, ¿verdad? En español diríamos así, chin-ups. He does chin-ups to make his arms stronger. Okay? To make his arms stronger. He does chin-ups to make his arms stronger. All right. So far we have covered 5 different kinds of exercises that people do in order to get warmed up. All right? So let's now review a little bit, what we've been talking about. So far, we have talked about basketball players. We have talked about how tall they have to be in order to become part of a basketball team and perform well. We also talked about the use of must, to indicate obligation and also to indicate logical deduction. And we gave you examples of how you can use must, with the 2 different meanings. Later, we practiced, understanding and using conditionals to talk about sports. And we talked about the structure of a conditional sentence, what comes first and then what comes after, the use of a comma, depending on the order of the elements in the sentence, sometimes also in a question. Then we started talking about physical exercise. Different kinds of physical exercise that you can do in order to get warmed up. And we said that a lot of athletes, or I would say all athletes, when they want to start practicing or when they want to start training one day or even before competition, they need to get their bodies warmed up. That's very important. And you learned the name of 5 different exercises that people can get in order to get warmed up, with no problem. Now I want to give you a task, and this task may be a good homework for you. I want you to integrate all the knowledge you've learned today, that of grammar, vocabulary, and sports, and to do the following task. This is going to be your first homework today. I want you to copy the homework now. You have to complete by adding a suitable result to these conditions. So you have to use here conditional clauses, You have to apply what you've learned. Este es un ejercicio de tarea en el que usted va a aplicar lo que ha aprendido hoy. Hoy hemos aprendido muchas cosas, ya lo decía en inglés, no lo voy a repetir en español. Usted tiene que aplicar los conocimientos que ha adquirido en la clase de hoy para completar este ejercicio. So what you have to do, you have to add a suitable result to these conditions. First of all, if you bend down, ¿cómo usted completaría esto? Si yo le digo, if you bend down, usted sabe lo que es porque ya se lo explicamos. What may happen? What will happen if you bend down? Okay? Number 2, if you do push-ups, what may happen? Puede usar may, porque puede ser algo que es posible. Si usted hace esto, usted puede tal cosa. Si no quiere expresar posibilidad, sino que quiere expresar seguridad en que algo va a ocurrir, diría entonces utilizaría will. Okay? Fíjense que le estamos hablando un poquito con la estructura. So, if you do push-ups, you can, that may happen. If you do sit-ups, what happens? What may happen? Number 4, if you jump the rope. Number 5, if you do chin-ups. Fíjense que le hemos puesto 5 ejercicios y usted tiene que completar con condicionales. Fíjense que cuando le pusimos los ejercicios, no estaban los ejemplos con las fotos, no había condicionales. Tiene que integrarme ahora una cosa con la otra. Eso sería lo que sería el primer ejercicio de tarea. Y el segundo, que es este que está aquí, también es para utilizar must en estos contextos. Le vamos a dar 2 minuticos para que usted lo vaya copiando mientras yo hablo. No pierda tiempo. Ahora es más importante que copie, casi que me escuche, pero si yo me escucho, si yo me callo, entonces usted se aburre. Use must to complete the following sentences. Number 1, if you want your body to be flexible, usted tiene que hacer tal cosa, ¿verdad? If you want your arms to get stronger, tiene que hacer más cual cosa. If you want your abdomen to tune up, what do you have to do? Okay, you have to use must in the to complete these sentences. Number 4, if you want your waist to be flexible. Number 5, if you want a good basketball team, what do you need to do? You must, do something in order to get a good team. So, I'm going to give you 1 minute to copy now. Vamos a completar esa copia. Me queda un minutico todavía para despedir. Vamos a copiar hasta que me llegue el tiempo ya de despedirme en la clase de hoy. Adelante la copia entonces. Okay, did you have time to copy? I think you did. I mean, we gave you plenty of time to finish copying all that. So that is going to be your homework. I mean, we want you to do that for our next lesson. I'm going to check the homework in our next lesson. And I'm sure you're going to profit from doing that because you're going to be able to integrate all the knowledge you have learned today. So I think we've had a good lesson. I have enjoyed my lesson today. I don't know if you have. We have talked about sports, we have talked about different sports, and we have talked about physical training in general. So I look forward to our next lesson in the next few days, and just wish you a good day. Goodbye.